Hello folks, Josh here from the Phoenix Club with another vlog for you today. Now some of you may have already watched Tom's video on why, as a Chelsea fan, he is Sarri in. Now if I were a Chelsea fan, I'd be very firmly on the other side of the fence, for two main reasons really, which I will detail in this video. So point number one is really about control. Quite simply put, Maurizio Sarri's got less control over that club than probably any manager in the history of Chelsea FC. I mean, we're talking about managers like AVB and even Jose in his second stint at the club. Now, if you've seen Tom's video, then you know that in it he mentions the issues surrounding player power and how, in his view at least, Sarri had asserted his authority by agreeing that goalkeeper Kepa Arrizabalaga should have been fined after the Spaniard refused to come off during the League Cup final. So let's quickly recap what actually did happen in that final for just a moment. So then Kepa goes down with an apparent cramp, and as a result of that, Kepa is then, meant to be substituted off by Maurizio Sarri, who then initiates the substitution. Willy Caballero is warming up, ready and waiting on the sidelines, before the official puts up his board with Kepa's number 1 in red, signalling for him to come off. But Kepa says no. Apparently, whatever the manager or the head coach or whatever he's called, whatever he says, doesn't go at Chelsea. And then the manager then tells the fourth official to cancel the substitution. And he has this episode on the touchline. On that note, actually, I thought the way in which he was threatening to walk out of the ground before doing a U-turn was pretty microcosmic of the situation as a whole. I mean, let's face it, in his heart of hearts, he probably does want to leave his job. But I don't believe that he's got the guts or the conviction to do so. I mean, it could be that he's just after a 7-figure payout for being sacked. But anyway, after letting his keeper win that power struggle, Sarri then proceeds to buzz around the Chelsea dugout like a wasp on heat. But that wasn't the sign of a manager that has got control over his playing staff. That was a way, in terms of, as far as I'm concerned, of him externalising his frustrations at being the head of that club in name only. And we saw in the break between extra time finishing and the penalty shootout starting, Sarri has to be physically restrained by, I think it was Antonio Rudiger, as he seemingly launches towards Kepa. Or put it another way, the manager's got to be held back by his own player. That's to say, the players, for better or for worse, are yet again demonstrating signs of taking control. And then after the conclusion of the final, which of course they lost, Sarri, presumably under pressure already from the Chelsea hierarchy, publicly states that it was all just one glorious misunderstanding, which is fine. But then can someone explain why Kepa was then dropped and then fined a week's wages for a supposed misunderstanding? And on a side note, what kind of castigation is a week's wages? Give him 2 at the very least. But how pathetic and pretty symbolic is a fine of 1 week's wages? But on the note of the dropping, I thought that Sarri, as the man that's meant to be picking this team each week, handled the entire debacle with an embarrassing lack of respect, both towards himself and his playing staff. Fair enough, he had to drop Kepa after he was outrightly disobeyed during that game, and a game that will probably end up defining both Chelsea's season and Sarri's entire tenure at Stamford Bridge. And indeed, it appeared to be a signal of intent that he was prepared to drop him for a game against opponents as strong as Spurs. But it seems that Willy Caballero was nothing more than a pawn in Sarri's game of chess with Kepa. Because it soon became apparent that not even keeping a clean sheet against one of the league's most feared attacking forces would be enough to keep Caballero in the starting 11, with Kepa reinstated for the following game against Fulham. And as far as I can remember, he's played actually every game since. Again, hardly the actions, in my view, of a manager that's earned the respect of his players. Now, if I'd been Sarri in that situation, I'd have outrightly refused to play Kepa again, and let that set the precedent to the rest of the playing staff, that I don't care how much you cost this club, I don't care how good you think you are, I don't care how important you think you are, I pick the team, I decide who comes on and off that pitch, and when. And if the Chelsea board didn't like it, and if it didn't end up sacking me, I think I'd probably walk. Of course, it might already be the case that his first season would also be his last. It's not as though the Stamford Bridge hierarchy is afraid to pull the trigger when necessary. But either way, no matter which successful team you look at, the players have always been on board with the manager at the helm. Whether we go back to Brian Clough at Forest, the classic Manchester United sides under Busby or Ferguson, Wenger's first half at Arsenal, Jose's first stint at Chelsea, and even nowadays with Pep Guardiola at City. And there is absolutely no evidence at this moment in time of those Chelsea players buying into whatever Sarri is trying to hammer home at the moment. Now moving on, and perhaps predictably, my next point is that Sarri is not a winner. Not to say that I think he should lose his job because he's yet to win a major trophy as manager, but rather because there seems to be a conflict between Sarri's lack of success and Chelsea's desperation for immediate success. It may of course be the case that, like no Chelsea manager before him, he's going to be given time for his philosophy to come to fruition on the pitch. But Chelsea have not hired him to win the Premier League in 2023, or even really 2020. They've hired him to win it now, in 2019, or at the very worst, to get a damn sight closer to winning it than they currently are now. Now, I'm not going to try and pretend that I'm well versed in the great Napoli side of 2015 to 18, that won a mind-blowing 0 trophies under Sarri, and I appreciate that Serie A is a difficult league to break down with the dominance of Juventus. But what I do know is that Sarri has gone on to make exactly the same mistakes that, as a United fan, I can only equate to LVG and Jose Mourinho, in that he's got this style of play which, in his mind at least, is foolproof and will work with no matter which set of players he's got. Except that the evidence from the last 30-odd games that he's been in charge of in the Premier League would actually suggest the contrary. But let's just say he does intend to do a Pep or a Klopp in using the first season or few seasons as the foundations to create a side that can seriously contend with the big boys. We have already established that Chelsea is not the club to do that at. Unfortunately, he's probably chosen the worst club in the top 6 to try that with. And with the exception of 1 or 2, success has always preceded managerial appointments throughout the Abramovich era. Mourinho was a Champions League winner, Scolari a World Cup winner, Ancelotti won everything possible at Milan, Hiddink also won the European Cup, Benitez too, and Conte had a series of Serie A titles to his name. And Sarri's claim to fame realistically is what exactly? The fact that he essentially turned Napoli into the Italian Spurs, or the fact that he managed to find a loophole in the smoking ban in English stadiums. And I think we have to be real about this. For everything Chelsea Football Club has stood for in the last 16 years, and for this short-term identity that it's created for itself, Maurizio Sarri is not and will never be the right fit. And to respond to one of Tom's points about why he can understand the Sarri out movement, that he doesn't play enough of the younger players, I think that's just another example of this small-minded, short-term philosophy that the club has had for the last decade and a half. I mean, the reason that the likes of Kevin De Bruyne, Romelu Lukaku, et al. Were not kept on by Chelsea was because at that moment in time, they weren't the finished article, and they were not going to be instrumental to any kind of success as young and inexperienced players. And I don't see why that's likely to be any different now with the likes of Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Callum Hudson-Odoi. Sarri ultimately knows that if he isn't playing his supposed first-rate squad week in, week out, and isn't taking a chance on youth, then he's just setting himself up for a fall, as and when they inevitably end the season trophyless. And while success has preceded almost each of Roman's appointments, failure has followed virtually each of his dismissals. So those are the main reasons why, if I were a Chelsea fan, I'd be firmly Sarri out. And I know that there's a lot of you out there that do agree with what Tom has to say, and he's obviously coming at it from a Chelsea fan's point of view, whereas, I'm a United fan, perhaps I'm looking at it from a slightly less emotional viewpoint. But either way, please let me know what you think in the comments or on Twitter, whether you're Sarri in, Sarri out, and for which reasons you agree or disagree with what I've had to say today. But anyway, I think that's pretty much all from me. I will be back at some point this week with a video detailing why, despite defeat in our last 2 games, that United should appoint Ole Gunnar Solskjaer on a permanent basis. And of course, please don't forget to subscribe. I mean, last month we hit our target of 50 subs. In fact, we smashed it. And we've already waded through this month's target of 100 subscribers. And I'm sure Tom has mentioned it on his videos. We just really, really, really want to keep this momentum growing and growing. And on a final note, you'll have noticed that we've not actually put out any content this week, any mainstream content, because we've been making a few tweaks, additions and subtractions to our main shows. And with any luck, we'll be returning with them this week, or failing that next week, hopefully at the absolute latest. Either way, that's all from me. I'm Josh from the Felix Club. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again later on in the week.